The vibration of my phone against the mahogany conference table was the only sound in the room. I tapped the screen, expecting a compliance update from legal. Instead, I saw 3 banking notifications stacked like dominoes. Viking River Cruise. Platinum Tier. Pending charge. $24,600. I blinked. For a second. My brain tried to reject the data. I haven't booked a vacation in 3 years. Then the text message slid into view. It was from my mother. Amanda. It read. Surprise. Since you are doing so well, we knew you would want to treat us for our 30th vow renewal. Love you. My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. That is the difference between a victim and an auditor. I simply turned my phone over, looked at the CEO, and said, "Excuse me. I have an urgent compliance breach to handle." I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Denver, unlocked my phone, and opened my banking app. I didn't call them. I didn't scream. I initiated the kill switch protocol. Freeze card. Freeze account. Report fraud. Access denied. Have you ever had a family member confuse your hard-earned money with their personal piggy bank? Drop a yes in the comments if you have ever had to hide your success, just to feel safe. I live in a glass box. My condo in downtown Denver has floor-to-ceiling windows, clear acrylic furniture, and absolutely nowhere to hide. I designed it this way on purpose. When you grow up in a house built on secrets, transparency becomes an obsession. I stood there, watching the traffic below. The adrenaline finally starting to cool into something sharper, something colder. I looked at the notification again. $24,600. Most daughters would be crying right now. They would be calling their mom, asking why, screaming. But I am not just a daughter. I am the fixer. It started when I was 10 years old. I remember sitting at our sticky kitchen table, the smell of stale cigarette smoke clinging to the curtains, balancing my father's checkbook because he said math gave him a headache. I found the errors. I moved the decimals. I saved us from bouncing a check for the electricity bill. He didn't say thank you. He just ruffled my hair and said, "Good girl. Maddie. You figure it out." That was the moment I signed the contract. Even if I didn't know it yet. It is called the competence tax. See, in a healthy family, competence is celebrated. In a toxic one, it is punished. If you are the one who has their life together, the one who saves money, the one who shows up on time, you do not get respect. You get the bill. You become the designated carrier for everyone else's chaos. My stability made me a target. My parents, Christopher and Amanda. I didn't see me as an independent adult. They saw me as an insurance policy that had finally matured. They saw my credit score as a communal resource. For 20 years, I paid the tax. I bailed my brother Joshua out when they refused to help him. I paid for the new roof when Dad gambled away the repair fund. I paid with my time, my sanity, and my silence. But this wasn't a tax. This was a raid. I looked at the charge again. $24,600 for a vow renewal ceremony in Tuscany. They wanted to celebrate 30 years of a marriage that was mostly held together by debt and denial. And they wanted me to foot the bill without even asking. I took a sip of my cold brew. The condensation felt freezing against my palm. I wasn't going to pay this bill. I was going to audit the entire account. I sat in the dark of my condo, phone in hand, my father's voice echoing in my ear. A group rate. He actually said the words, group rate. $1,200 per person. Maddie, he said, his tone light. Breze, as if we were discussing the price of appetizers. Not felony theft. I snagged us a deal. You are ruining the vibe with all these questions. Just let us have this. I looked at the bank statement glowing on my laptop screen. $24,600 divided by 3 tickets is $8,200. That is not $1,200. That is not a deal. That is a lie. A specific, calculated lie, designed to keep me quiet until the non-refundable date passed. They weren't just spending my money. They were banking on my compliance. They were betting on the fact that I would rather swallow the cost than cause a scene. I hung up without saying another word. I didn't argue. I didn't point out the math. Because in that moment, something fundamental broke. It wasn't my heart. It was the contract. The silent, invisible agreement that says, I owe them my loyalty because they gave me life. That contract was void. I sat there in the silence. The city lights of Denver, twinkling below me like a distant galaxy. And I named it. I gave it a label. Because once you name something, you can manage it. Financial infidelity. We talk about infidelity in marriages all the time. Cheating, lying, hiding assets. We know it destroys trust. We know it breaks the relationship because it proves that one partner views their own desires as more important than the other partner's reality. But when parents do it, we call it borrowing. We call it a misunderstanding. We call it family business. No, this was infidelity. By stealing $24,000 and lying about it, Christopher and Amanda hadn't just taken my money. They had looked me in the eye and told me that my autonomy, my security, and my consent did not matter. They viewed me as an obstacle to their happiness. Not as a person. Money is just the weapon. The wound is the lack of respect. They believed they were entitled to my labor. They believed that because they raised me, they owned me. I looked at the reflection of my face in the darkened window. I looked calm. I looked professional. Inside, I was reclassifying my parents. They were no longer family. They were hostile actors. And you do not negotiate with hostile actors. You neutralize them. I opened my laptop again. I wasn't going to sleep. I had work to do. I logged into my primary banking portal. My investment accounts. My credit monitoring service. I was going to perform a forensic audit of my entire life. If they lied about the tickets, what else were they lying about? I started with the small charges, the ones I usually ignored. $15 at a gas station in Aurora. $50 at a liquor store on a Tuesday. A subscription for a Wine of the Month club I definitely didn't sign up for. The pattern was subtle, but it was there. A slow, steady bleed. They had been testing the waters for months, seeing what I would notice, seeing what I would tolerate. Then I saw it. A notification in my spam folder from 6 months ago. DocuSign. Electronic signature confirmation. I froze. I hadn't signed anything 6 months ago. I clicked the link. It took me to a secure document portal. My breath hitched as the PDF loaded. It wasn't a credit card application. It wasn't a small loan. It was a co-sign agreement. For refinancing my parents' home. My name was on the borrower line. My digital signature was at the bottom. I stared at it. The pixels blurring slightly. I was in Denver when this was signed. The IP address log on the document receipt confirmed the signature came from a device in Aurora. Their house. They didn't just steal my money. They stole my identity. They forged my signature to pull equity out of their house. Equity they had likely already burned on dinners and appearances and maintaining the illusion of their perfect life. This wasn't a civil dispute anymore. This wasn't a family matter. This was wire fraud. This was a federal crime. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my father. I called the fraud department at the bank. Then I called the non-emergency police line. I needed a case number. I needed an affidavit. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was the lead investigator on the case of my own exploitation. And I was about to bring the hammer down. The moment the freeze hit. The panic was instantaneous. It wasn't a subtle ripple. It was a shockwave. My phone didn't just ring. It convulsed. 17 missed calls from my mother. 10 from my father. Then came the flying monkeys. That is the technical term for the enablers. A narcissist recruits to do their dirty work. In my family, the head flying monkey is Aunt Sarah. She called me at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Her voice was thick with that weaponized concern toxic families specialize in. Madison, she said. Your mother is devastated. She can't even get out of bed. How could you embarrass them like this over a simple vacation? You have plenty of money. You are making 6 figures. For heaven's sake. I listened to her breathe, imagining her sitting in her floral armchair, completely unaware that she was advocating for a felony. They had spun the narrative already. To them, I was the greedy daughter, hoarding her wealth, punishing her loving parents for a simple misunderstanding. They framed the victim as the abuser for daring to cut off the supply. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain the math or the fraud. You cannot explain color to a person who is determined to see only black and white. I just said, I understand you feel that way. Aunt Sarah. My phone buzzed against my cheek. A text from my brother. Joshua. It read, they are planning an intervention for you on Sunday. Watch out. They want you to unlock the cards. An intervention? The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. They were staging an intervention for me. The only person in the family who wasn't drowning in delusion. I made a decision right then. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to block them. I was going to attend. I'll come to dinner on Sunday. I told Aunt Sarah. My voice steady. I will bring the paperwork to sort this out. I could hear the relief in her exhale. She thought paperwork meant a check. She thought it meant I was coming to surrender, to sign the retroactive permission slip and smooth everything over. She was wrong. I spent Saturday night printing bank statements, the IP address logs from the DocuSign entry, the affidavit of forgery I had already filed with the police. I organized them into a black leather portfolio. Sunday afternoon. I didn't put on a sundress. I didn't dress for a family dinner. I put on my charcoal suit, the one I wear when I have to fire an executive for embezzlement. I wasn't going to dinner. I was going to war. When I walked into my parents' living room, the ambush was set. The whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. They were arranged in a semicircle, facing a single empty chair in the center of the room. My mother, Amanda, was sitting on the sofa, clutching a tissue, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. My father stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, looking stern and disappointed. I didn't take the empty chair. I walked past it to the smart TV mounted above the fireplace. The room went quiet. They were waiting for an apology. They were waiting for me to cry, to beg for forgiveness, to hand over the money. Madison, my father started, his voice deep and authoritative. We need to talk about your selfishness. You have hurt this family deeply. I didn't look at him. I plugged my laptop into the HDMI cable, dangling from the side of the TV. I prepared a presentation. I said, my voice was cold. It cut through the humidity of the room like a scalpel. A slide appeared on the 60-inch screen. On the left, the invoice from Viking River Cruises Platinum Tier. $8,200 per ticket. On the right, a text message from Dad claiming the tickets were $1,200. The air left the room. This is not a misunderstanding, I said, pointing to the screen. This is theft. But that is the least of your problems. I clicked the remote. The next slide appeared. The DocuSign timestamp, the digital signature, and the IP address log, proving the signature originated from this house. On this Wi-Fi network? While I was physically located in Denver. This is a federal crime, I stated. It is called wire fraud. And I have already filed the police report. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then, the explosion happened. My mother didn't faint. She didn't apologize. She shrieked. She threw her wine glass at the wall, shattering it, and lunged toward me. I gave you life, she screamed. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. You owe me everything, you ungrateful, hateful child. You will die alone. The room recoiled. My aunts and uncles looked terrified, but I stood perfectly still. I watched her scream. I watched my father turn purple, shouting that I was ruining the family name, This reaction has a name in behavioral psychology. It is called an extinction burst. When a manipulator realizes they have lost control, they don't negotiate. They detonate. The screaming isn't pain. It isn't grief. It is a tactic. It is the final, desperate attempt to force the victim back into submission through fear and volume. They were trying to scare me back into my role as the fixer. But I wasn't scared. I looked at my mother, heaving and sobbing on the floor, and I felt nothing but a cool, detached clarity. This is what happens when the ATM breaks, I said to the silent room. Then I unplugged my laptop, picked up my portfolio, and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. I didn't stay to watch the police cars turn into the driveway. I heard about it later, through the grapevine of cousins who suddenly found my phone number again. Apparently, when you present an affidavit of forgery to a bank, they are legally required to press charges. It wasn't a choice I made in the moment. It was a process I initiated the second I clicked report fraud. My parents lost the house. The refinancing deal fell through, obviously, and the investigation triggered a cross-default clause on their other debts. The house of cards didn't just fall, it incinerated. Christopher and Amanda are currently navigating bankruptcy court and a suspended sentence for wire fraud. They blame me. Of course, in their version of the story, I am the villain who abandoned them in their time of need. But I don't listen to their version anymore. I blocked their numbers. I blocked their emails. I audited them out of my life. 6 months later, the silence in my condo isn't heavy. It's peaceful. I'm sitting at my clear acrylic dining table. But I'm not balancing a checkbook for a man who hates math. I'm sitting across from my brother, Joshua. For years, they called him the screw-up, the scapegoat. They said he couldn't handle money. But as we went through his records, I found the truth. They had been using his social security number since he was 18 to open utility accounts they never paid. His irresponsibility was actually their identity theft. I watched him stare at his laptop screen today. He clicked refresh on the credit monitoring app. 720. He looked up at me. And for the first time in his adult life, it didn't look tired. He looked free. We didn't hug. We aren't that kind of family yet. We are still learning how to be people without the weight of their expectations crushing us. He just nodded and said, "Thanks, Maddie." I looked at my own screen. My audit report was clean. 0 fraud alerts. 0 unauthorized users. 0 guilt. It cost me a lot to get here. I lost my parents. I lost the illusion of a happy childhood. I lost the approval of half my extended family. But I gained something much more valuable. I gained my sovereignty. I realized that you cannot buy love. And you definitely shouldn't have to pay a tax to receive it. If you are the strong one in your family, the one who fixes everything, the one who pays the bills, you need to ask yourself a hard question. Are you being loved? Or are you being used? Real loyalty isn't blind obedience to people who hurt you. Real loyalty is being loyal to your own future. It is knowing that you are not an asset to be liquidated. You are a person, and sometimes the only way to save yourself is to close the account. Have you ever had to fire a family member from your life? Tell me your survival story in the comments.